Fishes primarily breathe through their gills. They're moving water over gills. I want to talk a little bit about that. But a lot of fishes also have ways of mechanisms for breathing air. Some fishes have lungs, actually. They're homologous viewer lungs, or other structures, and we'll worry about those in other points in time. And then, obviously, aquatic tetrapods, like whales and polar bears and sea snakes, are breathing with their lungs just like you do, so it's not really any different. So there's a fish head, a bony fish, an advanced fish, and the gills. And water's pulled in through the mouth, and it's run over these gills. And the gills are arranged, these are called arches, overlaying there. And the gills are arranged there with trailing little filaments on them. So we have a tremendous amount of surface area, moving that water over all the surface area. These are very, very thin and small, and there's blood flowing through them. So as the blood flows over them, oxygen is extracted, ends up in the blood, and things you don't want, like carbon dioxide, just diffuse into the environment. That's the nuts and bolts of it. We're going to zoom right in here and just look at a cross-section of this thing. It's called a gill filament of a typical fish, and we've got the blood flowing through it. And this is one of many places in animals where you see something called a countercurrent system. Current means flow, right? Something's flowing. And counter means two things are flowing in the opposite direction, a countercurrent system. And a gill is a good place to see that. So the water flow is going in this way, top to bottom. And it's flowing over these very thin filaments with a lot of blood flowing through them, and the blood flows in the opposite direction, countercurrent. With this situation, with this setup, as that water and blood flow in opposite directions, though, we can pull almost all the oxygen out of the water just by diffusion. Remember, diffusion, area of greater concentration, area of lower concentration. Now, the countercurrent system, you get almost all of it. And here's the deal here. Here's a countercurrent system, two things flowing in opposite direction. This would be concurrent flow. And this would be the water flowing in the same direction as the blood. If this were how it were set up in a concurrent system, we could only get half the oxygen out of the water. With a countercurrent system, we get almost all of it. Half, almost all. Let's see why. So, let's go down here to the countercurrent flow. The water is flowing from this side to this side. The blood is flowing this way. All right? The numbers here represent saturation of oxygen. And so as the water first comes in the gills, it has the most oxygen it's ever going to have. It's got 100% of its oxygen. And it's encountering blood that has been picking up oxygen from blood as it flows through the gill filament. So by the time the blood gets to the end of the gill filament, it's got a lot of oxygen in it. But it doesn't have as much as the water coming in has. The water coming in is always going to have a little bit more than the blood leaving the gill. So as the water flows through and starts losing its oxygen, there's less and less oxygen in the blood, but it's always encountering, it's less and less oxygen in the water, but it's always encountering blood that has even less. So we can, even though there's only 25% saturation here, for encountering blood with 20% saturation, we're still going to get diffusion. And even by the time we get to the end here, the oxygen saturation in the blood is almost complete. It's encountering water that has even more oxygen. So we're still going to get diffusion. And we get almost all the oxygen out of the blood, out of the water, and into the blood with a countercurrent system. With a concurrent system, if they're both flowing in the same direction, very quickly, about halfway through, we're going to reach a spot where half the oxygen, and we have 50% saturation in the water, 50% saturation in the blood. We're not getting diffusion anymore. And so half that distance, nothing happening. So when we set things in opposite flow, and you see these in glands, you see them in heat conservation, you see them in blood extraction, set up a countercurrent system to concentrate something. And you let diffusion do the work. You don't have to pump it. We could pull all the oxygen out of the water if we had a pump that grabbed oxygen and pulled it. But that would take energy. This is free. That's not clear. I think this is a common countercurrent system is in the limbs of things that live in cold climates, like these feet of like an Arctic fox or something. And what we're trying to conserve here or collect here is heat. And so as the blood flows out of the body, it's nice and warm. Losing a lot of heat as it goes to the feet and then back up. But we have a countercurrent system here. If we take the inflowing cold blood and put it right next to the outflowing warm blood, that warm blood flowing down is going to encounter cold blood coming up, and the heat's going to move over. And the heat's going to be concentrated in the body. A more simple, maybe, countercurrent system than the gills here. So in fish gills, we set up this system with countercurrent flow, and they can very efficiently extract the oxygen from the water. And again, a lot of aquatic systems don't have a lot of oxygen in them, so that's an important adaptation. I just decided here I'd break to relocate some of this stuff later, so we'll come back to this. I do want to point out, this is just different kinds of gills in fish, so I won't do that in fishes. I do want to point out that all fishes have gills, and all fishes breathe with gills. But some fishes live in habitats where oxygen levels are very poor, and they have other adaptations to extract oxygen. This is a lungfish. He's got a gill chamber with gills. He breathes with gills like a normal fish would. But he also has lungs. And lungs are just outpocketings of the esophagus, pump air into them to gas exchange. And lungfish evolved lungs. They're homologous to your lungs. This is where lungs originate. And there are lung-breathing fishes with us today. We'll look at this one in lab week after next. And there's lots of other adaptations fishes have for extracting oxygen without their gills. Some fishes put bubbles of air in their mouth and do gas exchange there. Some fishes swallow air and do gas exchange in their stomachs. So anyway, we'll do more about that when we do fishes, I think. Another aquatic issue, this is primarily a fish issue. I have to think a little more around and add some stuff about non-fishes, but fishes that are fully aquatic have an issue with buoyancy. Buoyancy is maintaining your position in the water column. If you're heavier than water, you're going to sink to the bottom. If you're lighter than water, you're going to float. And a lot of fishes don't want to do either of those things. They want the intermediate thing. They need to maintain a neutral buoyancy. And they can do it by swimming or treading water like you do. But that takes a lot of energy. So fishes have adaptations to alter their density to control their buoyancy. Now some fishes don't need buoyancy, like things that live on the bottom, like this little shark, this little skate. Really doesn't have any adaptations for buoyancy because it doesn't need any. It spends its whole life sitting on the bottom. But other fishes do. And if this guy didn't have specific adaptations for maintaining his buoyancy, he'd have to expend a lot of energy to keep from sinking to the bottom because he's heavier than water. Or if he were lighter than water, he wouldn't want to float to the surface and get sunburned. So we have buoyancy adaptations. Some fishes, and sharks are a good example, have hydrodynamic lift. When you look at pictures of sharks, they're frequently the pectoral fins, the fins up front are big, and they're like airfoils, hydrofoils. They're like wings. And as this guy moves through the water, and this head helps too, they get lift like an airplane wing moving through the air. Look at the big fins there. They're like wings. So his buoyancy comes from basically flying in the water. Some fishes concentrate buoyant materials in their body. And we'll look at sharks in lab week after next. And sharks have this enormous liver, much bigger for body size than any other fish, certainly bigger than you. And liver does certain digestive things, but in the shark, it does much more than that. It's packed with oils. And you know oil floats, right? So they've got this big, greasy liver that basically lessens its density. Shark liver oil, right? Cod liver oil, too. Bony fishes, which I call higher fishes, have a more complex adaptation, which we're not going to deal with in a lot of detail here, but they have what's called a swim bladder. And it's a structure, it's a gas-filled structure in their body cavity, and they've got these really cool glands that can either put gases into it, fill it up with gases like pumping up a balloon, or remove gases. And And so anyone scuba dive here? You put on that buoyancy compensator vest, you've seen people with that. Put air into it, you lessen your density, bleed air out, you become heavier. That's what a swim bladder is. And it's this feature, gas-filled sac. They can put gases into it, they can take gases out of it, and they can adjust their density. Very, very precisely. So these are all adaptations that these creatures have to avoid spending a lot of energy maintaining their place in the water column. So unless you're sitting on the bottom, you're going to have some adaptations to get off that bottom. Aquatic senses. To make this point again, vertebrate senses, the vertebrate senses you have originate as aquatic senses. Let's have a look. They're a little bit different in water than in air. It's largely the same organs, the same structures, but there's some things that aquatic things do that we don't. The chemosenses, chemical senses, are, we touched on these earlier, taste and smell, miscellaneous. There's a few other senses we don't have there. These are senses where the receptor is responding to a chemical stimulus. So the molecule is encountering a sensor in some way. And there's two chemical senses here. There's taste, which we call gustation, and there's olfaction, which is the sense of smell. And these are the same in you. Your sense of smell is very much the same as fish's smell. It's in the nostrils here. The fish's sense of taste is often spread out over their body. Your taste is concentrated on your tongue as a terrestrial vertebrate. A lot of fishes have taste buds all over their bodies. Olfaction starts in fishes, and it's through what we call external nares. These are your external nares here, your nostrils. And the water's moved in one and out the other. And inside there's a sensory structure over which that water passes, and chemicals are detected. Now, you as a terrestrial vertebrate do this. You can feel your lungs through your nose. In fishes, there's no connection. This is just about smelling. They're not moving water into their mouth cavity through their nostrils. They're blind. And so there's a diagram there, inflow, outflow, and there's a structure there called the rosette. And it's similar in yours. It's a sensory structure, responds to different kinds of chemicals, and then sends a signal to the brain. And all sorts of different ways to smell if you're a fish. You can have some fishes with highly elaborate and very sensitive collectors and sensors. You have others that aren't very elaborate at all. It just goes into play with what kind of niche you're dealing with, what's important to you. There's a salmon. You should probably find a better picture of a salmon. Salmon migrate, you know, right? They migrate from the ocean to a freshwater stream to spawn. They find that freshwater stream by smelling. That guy missed the bear, though. Okay. Taste. Taste is gustation. The difference between taste and smell is very specific and it's anatomical. If the sense organ, go back to olfaction, if the sense organ that you're talking about connects to the brain in a part of the brain we call the olfactory lobe, then that's olfaction. That's the sense of smell. That's our definition of smell. There's a part of the brain that handles it. The sense of taste, you might think, well, it's kind of similar. It's chemical senses. The sense of taste is handled by parts of the brain other than the olfactory lobe. So that's how we define taste. It's not olfaction. And the core of taste is the taste bud. And again, in terrestrial tetrapods, on the tongue, fishes tend to have them all over their body. It's a structure, it's a contact sensor. It comes in contact with the material that it's sensing. Olfaction, the single molecules can be suspended in the water, or in your case, in the air. This is a contact sense. The taste bud is pressed up against the structure or the thing it's tasting. Same thing, though. Responds to the stimulus, and then the nerve sends that information to the brain to be integrated. And a lot of fishes are taste specialists. There's vision specialists, smelling specialists, taste specialists. And if you look at catfishes, All those whiskers on their face, those are covered with taste buds. This is a gourami. These are taste buds covering his pelvic fin filaments, pectoral fin filaments. Again, taste buds here. This sea robin, if you see them in an aquarium, they're kind of crawling around the bottom. He's pushing those little filaments into the gravel looking for invertebrates. And catfish, typically have taste buds all over their belly. If you think of those poor catfish living in a stinky pond, and they sit on the bottom and they're tasting that revolting pond water all the time. Hearing, and these are the otic senses, O-T-I-C, otic, hearing. And you as a terrestrial vertebrate and fishes use the same structure for hearing, but hearing's not quite the same for a fish and for you. So let's look at hearing balance and what we call the lateral line. This is the vertebrate hearing sensor. It's called a neuromast organ. It's a bundle of cells, and it's got these special cilia or flagella that extend up here, and it's a physical sensor. Hearing is a vibration. It's disturbance in the air or the water, and when that vibration encounters this structure, the structure right here, it gets bent or it vibrates, and that stimulates a nerve signal. So this is a mechanical sense. This is a mechanical sense too. When you touch yourself, but this is a very fine mechanical sense, and hearing is based on these things vibrating. In your inner ear, I think it's your cochlea, all these little hair cells, and your inner ear bones and your eardrum transmit those vibrations to your inner ear. That's what's responding. And if you're like me and you were stupid when you were young and you did lots of shooting without ear protection, you've damaged these little hair cells. I don't have any high-end hearing anymore. I can't hear. When you ladies talk to me and I say, I'm sorry, because I can't hear your high-pitched voices. That's why I'm not trying to be rude. I can't always hear you. Now, that's the basic there. In you, all this is confined to your inner ear. Fishes have these sense organs in other places, and fishes have something called the lateral line. We'll look at this in lab. This is the lateral line on these guys here. There is a canal under the scales and through the scales. It runs along the flank of this little guy's body. A canal filled with water. And in that canal, there's a really nice one shown here in this ratfish. This is the canal here. And in that canal are these little neuromast organs. So this is cross-section through fish skin. There's scales, there's the skin, there's connections to the outside. And so vibrations impinge upon this and deflect those. And so this guy here has lateral line on his trunk and lateral line on his face, phallic lateral line. As his body encounters vibrations moving through the water, he's getting enormously detailed information. I don't know the word for it, he's feeling everything around him. And as he moves, and sound waves or shock waves move through the water and hit a rock and come back, he's feeling that, tasting it, hearing it. I don't know the right word for it. But fishes have very detailed what we call situational awareness. Everything around them, they know. Because they're feeling, hearing it, I don't have the right word. And it's all through this system here. And a lot of fishes, like I said, it's all over their body. So when you're up in a high mountain stream going trout fishing and you think you're being so quiet as you walk along the bank of the stream and you step very quietly out to go, put your fly out there for the trout, they know as soon as you put your foot in the water, oh, there's something over there. Every crunch of the gravel that your boot makes, they feel that. So that's the lateral line. It runs throughout the organism. And as a tetrapod, you've concentrated this in your inner ear. And we call hearing. There's the inner ear, and that's a fish inner ear. Yours looks similar, but not quite entirely the same. The inner ear has these hoops in it, these canals, and there's fluid in them. And at certain points, there's those little neuromast organs to vibrate with sound vibrations, and also respond to movement. You know, you can close your eyes and you know you're moving forward. You know you're accelerating in a car or decelerating. Even your eyes are closed. And that's your inner ear. You know, if your eyes are closed, you know your head's on the side, right? That's this. As the fluid moves around in these canals, it stimulates those neuromast organs in different places. And so when you stop, the fluid sloshes around and tells you you've stopped. When you accelerate, the fluid moves around. Put your head on the side. The fluid moves in a certain way. Tells you your head's on your side. Sometimes when you have an ear infection, you lose your balance, right? That's because this isn't working right. Inner ear evolution. Primitive fishes only have one canal. A little more advanced fishes have two. Everybody else has three. We have a canal in each plane of movement, horizontal, vertical, and perpendicular to that. So in a vertebrate, this has to be a fish. The hearing is concentrated in what's called the otic region of the skull. It has a sharp down here, down in there. That's where that inner ear is. Okay, we'll come back and talk about hearing as we transition from aquatic to terrestrial, because there's an interesting transition there. But let's move on here and look at a couple other things that really only apply to fishes. I don't think of any tetrapods that have these senses. There are fishes with electrosensory capabilities. Again, we don't have the right word for it. I don't know if it's feel, taste, smell. There are some fishes that, when an electrical field is put out in the water, they can sense it. And every living thing, when it's alive, has an electrical field around it when it's in the water. Your nerve impulses, your muscle movements create electrical fields. And so even if you're absolutely still, there's an electrical field in the water around you. And there are some fishes that can taste that. And some of them are passive, like sharks. We'll look at these in lab, these little openings here. These are for electric sensors. And he's just tasting it. Catfishes have all of them in face too. So he's swimming through murky water. He knows something's in front of him. Or swimming across a sandy bottom, he knows there's a crab buried in the sand there by sensing the electricity. In sharks, they're called the ampullae of Lorenzini. And Lorenzini must have been the guy who described them. And it's a sensory structure. It connects to the water, and that's all these little holes here. And tasting electricity. What words should we use? Taste, smell, hear?
Experience.
Experience. Thank you. That's the word we want. Experience. So they've done experiments. You know, he can detect a living fish buried in the sand and know where to strike and grab it. You can put dead meat there and he won't sense it. Particularly if you close up his nose, he can't smell it. You can put electrodes in the sand and pump through them the weak electrical signals that look like a buried fish or buried crab, and they will strike on that. Some fishes actually generate electrical fields around them on purpose. They put electrical fields out in the water. They have a picture here. And they talk to each other with electrical pulses. They not only put the electricity in the water, they taste it. And they have signals, frequencies and pulse rates that are unique to that species, or unique to males, or unique to females. And they communicate with each other that way. And they also, if there's an object here, like a rock or a piece of tree root, it'll impinge on their electrical field, and they'll know that. So it's a sensory field around them as they move through the water. Not a lot of fish do this, but some do. Go to an aquarium shop and you see these funny things, something like baby whales. They're not big like whales, they're only about this big. But that's a group of fishes that does this. All right. One more issue here in kind of physiology, and that's thermal regulation, temperature regulation. Two good biology words, which are probably in your vocabulary, but let's make sure so I can start using them. Endothermic and ectothermic. Endothermic, the rough phrase you associate that as warm-blooded. Is it like a mammal or a bird? Warm-blooded, that's endothermic. And what that means is you have a steady internal body temperature that never changes unless you're sick. you maintain a particular body temperature that's perfect for you, and you have to expend energy to do that. That's endothermic, birds and mammals mostly. And then ectothermic, you don't have specific mechanisms to control your body temperature precisely. You don't burn energy to maintain a constant temperature. If it gets cold outside, your body temperature drops. If it warms up, your body temperature will warm with the environment. Ectothermic, that's cold-blooded, like a reptile or an insect or a fish. Endothermy is expensive. You know, you have an endothermic pet like a dog or a cat, you feed them every day because a lot of what the food they take in, they're just burning energy to keep their body warm, like you are. You have a pet fish, and you can go away for 3 or 4 days or a week, and they're okay. They're not happy, but they're okay. You don't have to feed your snake every day because they're not burning nearly the amount of energy. So this is expensive, but it opens up a lot. It opens up being active in cold times of the day or night because you're carrying your heat with you. When a cold-blooded thing gets cold, its biochemistry slows down and becomes sluggish. If you ever want to, what you've seen, a good example is I was out with a guy once, and he was taking photographs of lizards for a field guide. Have you ever tried to take pictures of lizards? Well, he would catch one, and then he'd put it in a beer cooler on ice for about 20 minutes, and then he'd pose it on a rock. And it wasn't dead, and it could move, but it was really, really sluggish, and it gave him time to set up the camera and focus. So that's the challenge there. When it gets cold, you slow down. But this is very expensive, but it means you can go all sorts of different places and be active at night, for example, when it's cold. There's a little bit of physics here, and this is something you may have experienced if you are very slight or thin of frame, or have a friend and you're out hiking. It's the thin person that gets cold first. And it's the heavier person that maintains their heat better. And it has to do with surface area to volume. You lose your heat through your surface area. And the larger you are, the greater volume you have per surface area. Very small things like hummingbirds have a very hard time conserving heat when it gets cold because they're so small. An elephant, on the other hand, cools down or warms up much, much more slowly. It's so much bigger. That's that surface area to volume ratio. So very small things like hummingbirds have a real challenge. And when I was in grad school at Arizona State, there was a breezeway. It was a dead breezeway. It had big windows on either side and then a door at the end and one open at the outside. And I used to make a habit of walking through there whenever I was walking by because hummingbirds would fly in there and get lost. And they couldn't find their way out. And after 3 or 4 hours, they would end up on the floor because they were freezing to death even on a warm day. So, but that's okay. You pick it up and you hold it in your hand for a few minutes till and there it goes. Cold-blooded things do have thermal regulation. Cold-blooded things can regulate their temperatures in a couple different ways. Some of it's behavioral. You see lizards sitting on rocks on a cold morning warming themselves up, right? And the evening around where I live, the sun's been beaten down on the sidewalk all day long. When I walk back to my apartment, I'll see the lizards stretched out on the sidewalk like this, trying to absorb heat from the pavement. So there's behavioral ways, and things that can move around, like these are salmon, sometimes seek warmer parts of a reservoir. If they're in an artificial impoundment like a reservoir and they want warm water, they'll go to the surface where it's warmer. If they want to be cooler, they'll move to the bottom where the waters are cooler. So things will move to their optimum temperature if they can. Sometimes we screw things up. This is a nuclear power plant next to an ocean, and the bright colors there, that's heat waste. A power plant makes a tremendous amount of heat waste. It's usually dumped into a river, a lake, or an ocean. And in a situation like this, you can find tropical organisms in Northern California in the middle of winter. They'll find a little pocket there for themselves. Turn off the plant, they're going to die. But they'll find that heat if they want it. The other side of that coin is, if you're a native thing here and you don't like the warm water, this habitat's now off limits for you. Here's a countercurrent system for heat conservation in tuna. The powerful swimming muscles in tuna are along the flank here. And when muscles move, they warm up. And in tuna, they've got the blood flow system in and out of those muscles such that the heat is conserved in those muscles. And so the swimming muscles of a tuna, well, that's kind of, I wouldn't call it warm-blooded, I wouldn't call it endothermic, but they're elevating that muscle temperature beyond the environment through a countercurrent system. And this is my favorite. I can't find a good picture of it, but you can picture a swordfish, one of these big, magnificent, these are like lions on the food chain in the ocean. And their niches, they swim in the shallow, warm waters to digest their food and warm up. And then when they're hungry, they dive deep. And they've got these huge eyes. They dive deep into the dark water and they look for squid. And they go squid hunting in the dark, cold water. And then they come back up to the surface water to warm up and digest. But while they're down there in their cold water, their bodies cool off. And they become sluggish. But what they have on top of their brain and on top of their optic nerves, they've got little pads of muscle that are like heating pads. And it keeps their brain warm, and it keeps their eyes warm. And so when they're down there hunting, those two things respond very quickly and don't cool off like the rest of the body does. I think that's really kind of cool. The brain warmer. Now again, these have all been fish examples, but we do have aquatic tetrapods. These are some mammals here, so they're warm-blooded creatures. They have pretty profound thermal issues because water carries heat away very efficiently. You know that. You get in a cold swimming pool, you're pretty tired pretty quickly. My brother came out and went scuba diving one year off Anacapa, and I had never seen him so tired. He went scuba diving all day and came back and slept for like 26 hours. Just pulls the heat out of you. So we have to have adaptations here. And so sea otters, for example. Have you ever been close to a sea otter, had a sea otter pelt of fur? Furriers, the people who sell fur, have a grading system, 1 to 10. So, and 10 is the softest fur, 1 is the coarse. So 1 is like pig bristles on the back of a hog. And sea otter is 10. Soft fur. Traps air and helps them insulate. Something like a walrus has no hair, no fur at least, but a very thick layer of fat for an insulating structure there. And these guys sit on ice. You can't do that. Not for very long. And here's some things that never leave the water. Well, penguins do, but some things that rarely leave the water. Whales, big thick layer of blubber. They go up into those cold Arctic oceans to feed. Water that if you fell off a boat in the Bering Sea, you've got like 10 minutes you can survive. They live up there. And have you ever been out in the sea lions and seen them do this? They're floating in the water and the tour boat goes by and everyone thinks they're waving at them. That water's so cold, he's trying to get anything out of the water he can. Just to maybe absorb a little sunlight or at least not lose heat to the water. And penguins? I get this question as a zoologist from time to time. Penguins don't have feathers. They're fuzzy like mammals. Penguins are mammals. They have very, very fine feathers. They're birds. Okay. Let's call it a day here. And we will pick up with this on Monday. I'll get farther thing. That's a good place. We're going to start vertebrate diversity Monday, and now we'll work on our lab. That's where our lab starts.